Losing All-Pro left tackle Rashawn Slater was a devastating blow for the Chargers, but I still think that they can get to 10 wins in 2025.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 10 seasons, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
It's going to be a little bit more challenging, but we're going to tell you exactly how the Chargers can still get to 10 wins in 2025. And will the Chargers offensive line be the reason why they can't reach their potential this season? And there's some experiments going on in that cornerback room. Is it going to work out for Jesse Minter's defense this season?
Chargers have kept betting on buy low candidates. It might come back to bite them, hopefully not. But this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Just like there's more to every player, more dedication, more attention to detail, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Stay tuned later in the episode for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. And David, today we wanted to kind of, with the last non-show week type of show, get into kind of the biggest questions that we still have about this team and some of the biggest factors as to whether this will be a successful season or not. But earlier in the offseason, both of us had the Chargers getting to double-digit wins. That was also before they lost Rashawn Slater. We've talked before about how this is a tougher schedule. This is not going to be, the amount of layups or cakewalks that they saw in 2024. But to me, David, and it might be an oversimplification, it might seem a little bit too simple to be the case, but I think if you have Jim Harbaugh as your head coach, if you have Justin Herbert as your quarterback, and you have star players on both sides and the amount of depth that the Chargers have, there's no reason that this shouldn't be a 10-win team. And if they don't get to double-digit wins, maybe 9, depending on how the season goes, you can feel okay about. But 10 feels like the number you need to get into the playoffs, and anything less than that feels like a disappointment.
I think it is a disappointment, quite frankly. I think when you have this team assembled the way it is, yes, the Rashawn Slater injury is massive. It's incredibly important. He's one of the best left tackles in the game of football, period. Whenever you lose that, it definitely is going to have an effect, no question about it. But with that being said, the Chargers really reinforced pretty much everywhere on their football team. They got much better at their skill positions on offense. They reinforced their defense. They made some smart, prudent decisions. They didn't make any splashy type of decisions, but everything was definitely predicated and dedicated to adding more quality depth to this football team, because injuries happen to everybody, and how you're able to weather that is really going to determine how well you're going to be able to do. I still feel like they did a good job of doing that, and I still believe because of that is the reason why they will still get to 10 wins in 2025.
I think to your point, there aren't the amount of obvious flaws on this roster. And I mean, what this new regime is trying to do, right, is basically rebuild on the fly. Like last year was a rebuilding year where they ended up winning 11 games. And I think that they're trying to change a lot about this roster. They're trying to make it in the image of Jim Harbaugh and what a Jim Harbaugh team should look like. But last year, you had serious questions about RB1 and RB2, wide receiver 2 and 3, any of the tight ends last year, because Will Dissly was your top guy, the interior defensive line, the interior of the offensive line. You still have that one, but it's not as many obvious flaws as you had last year. And I just think that if you went and talked to Chargers fans and asked them if this was one of the better teams that Justin Herbert has ever had, it'd be hard for a lot of people to tell you that it isn't. And so You're saying that team shouldn't get to 10 wins. I think it's setting expectations too low. Like, yes, they have a tough schedule. They should get to 10 wins, but what it's going to come down to is the ability to beat good teams. They have 9 games against 2024 playoff teams in this upcoming 2025 season. Last year, they had 7 of those games. They went 2-5 in them. And the 2 wins that they had were both against the Broncos. They lucked out with exceptionally easy quarterback schedule and offenses that they played last year. And then against the good offenses, they got shredded like Tampa Bay, Baltimore, Cincinnati. Even if they won that game, the defense got torched in it.
Yeah.
And I just think that year one under Jim Harbaugh, you beat the teams you're supposed to beat. Year two under Jim Harbaugh, you have to start beating some of those good teams, because if you don't, not only will you not win a playoff game for the first time in Justin Herbert's career, you won't even give him a chance to.
Yeah, and that right there is an outcome that's purely unacceptable to me. I think this year Justin Herbert is primed and ready to break out and really have his coming to the NFL and really breakout season to where he shuts up all the haters and really leaves no doubt that he is one of the premier players in this league. But it starts with handling those games on your schedule that are the most difficult. You have to perform better against these teams. The way I see it, it's the Chiefs, Broncos twice a piece, the Commanders, the Eagles, the Steelers, the Vikings, and the Texans. I feel like you have to come out of those 9 games at plus 500. I think it's got to be 5-4 at minimum for you to be able to put yourself in good position to be able to get to double-digit wins. And then the other teams, the other 8, I feel like you have to go at least 5-3 in those. And I feel like that's probably something they can absolutely do, and they can overachieve in that. But there are games every single year you go into it feeling very confident that the Chargers are going to win, and they find a way to lose. It happens every single season. So kind of factoring in that's how I feel like the Chargers have to handle business if they're going to get to double-digit wins.
Well, and the thing about this team, even with, especially since Justin Herbert has taken over, is like most years it was only could the Chargers passing attack beat the other team. And that was it, right? Like now, hopefully you can win some games with your running game. You could win some games with your defense. And we saw some of that last year. And you can also win some games with Justin Herbert's arm, but not have that be the only option to go and win games, especially because as we've seen against good teams, not just last year, but the last several years, it's not enough for him to do it by himself. And last year against those good offenses, against those good defenses, they just looked overmatched. And I think they've closed the gap there somewhat. But I think what makes it tough in predicting their wins this year is how many wins are they going to get inside of their own division, because the rest of the division has gotten stronger around them. After going 4-2 in 2024, sweeping the Broncos and the Raiders, there aren't cakewalks on this schedule this year. The Broncos are better than they were last year. The Raiders have a legitimate head coach and a quarterback, which they haven't had in 5+ years. It is going to be much tougher to get those wins in the division, David, and I think anything less than 3-3 there would feel like a disappointment.
Yeah, for me, I think it's got to be 4-2. It's got to be 4-2 for me. I feel like you got to split with the Chiefs. I know it's something you haven't done in a very, very long time, but I think they're going to. I've said it all off season. I feel confident that the Chargers are going to split with them. I want to see them sweep the Broncos, but I have to be more realistic. The Broncos are a better football team this year. They have a very good defense that they got even better and reinforced and brought even more good players to that. And they have a quarterback in the second year of a system that had a pretty decent rookie season. I'm not sold on him yet, but they're a quality football team. I think they're going to split with them. I still feel like the Raiders are a few years away. Yes, they are. They've gotten better, but I still feel like the Chargers should sweep them. And so that's why I have it at 4-2 in the AFC West for the Chargers again in 2025.
Yeah, and those 4 wins are going to be tougher to come by. It does feel like if you're going to get to 4, one of those wins has to be the Chiefs, whether you drop one to the Broncos or the Raiders. It doesn't feel like you're going to go 4-0 against those two teams in 2024 or 5 like you did in 2024. So I think, the Raiders, the defense, especially the secondary specifically, I'm not sold on. And you're right. Like I said on the AFC West squad show, I'm not totally sold on a Bo Nix huge leap in 2025. At the same time, it's hard to argue with how much better that roster is. A lot of it is dependent on health, but so is the Chargers too. So a very good defense that could be the best defense in the NFL, a huge home field advantage in that game that they're going to have to play in Mile High. Yeah, it's going to be tough to take both of those games. I think they could still do it, but I think their best path to do it is winning a game against the Chiefs, and I think they will get one. I think you had them winning on Friday in your first predictions, but I think you had them going 3-3 with splitting every one of those series. But now you come to the dark side, so to speak, taking them against the Raiders in both those games. But yeah, I think they will get them this year. Neutral field, in Brazil. That one's tough. We're going to have to wait till Friday's show to get that prediction. But I do think the Chargers can go 4-2. Anything less than 3-3 makes it feel like the playoffs might be out of the picture for this Chargers team. But we still have much more to get into, including if the offensive line could potentially tank everything we're talking about and actually ruin this season, and if the running game can be better, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. This is Mazda's Moving the Game Forward, brought to you by those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it, because these moments do more than win. They push what's possible, and they remind us to go that extra yard, shift into that extra gear, and keep the game moving forward. I know going into this matchup for the Chargers, they didn't have the clutch plays that they needed to last year against the Chiefs going 0-2. This year, they need to have those game-defining moments. They need to find the breakout performances, and as the Chargers have needed to over the last couple years, in those clutch moments late in the game and all of these close games, can you come through in those big moments? Because that is what keeps fans moving forward. That's what keeps fans and players alike moving forward, always chasing the next great moment. When you follow that move, follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning, and just like that, there's more to every highlight. There's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. I also need to tell you guys about Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts at your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you punting on projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Their Trademaster perks, like priority shipping and dedicated support, make the whole process smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. David, we have more kind of lingering questions about this Chargers team, as this is the last crossover Thursday, Keys for Success Friday show that we have this week. And I think a lot of, the biggest thing that's weighing on Chargers fans' mind going into this is the offensive line. So the biggest question to me is, will the Chargers offensive line tank the season? Or I guess, are you so concerned about the offensive line that you don't think the Chargers can have a successful season? And I think you go into it, David, with really big question marks. There are some places I think this line could improve. There's best case scenarios, but it's hard not to feel like this is kind of the one unit where the success of that unit is going to have just a huge kind of overstated impact on what this Chargers season can be.
Well, you had a burning desire all offseason for the Chargers to be more proactive and active, trying to fix the interior of the offensive line and bring in more competition, and it just did not really happen. They felt very comfortable with who they had, with Zion Johnson and Bradley Bozeman, and of course the big addition, the big ticket, Mekhi Becton, is the only real improvement that you can feel confident that you're going to see. The other part of this is I hope that when Zion Johnson was cross-training to learn how to play the center position, that education will help him be able to play the guard position better, will allow him to anticipate the movements of Bradley Bozeman, the center, better, be able to communicate better, and to be able to handle those stunts and twists that were so devastating to the Chargers, not only throughout the season last year, but more prominently in that playoff game against the Houston Texans. That's why it's like, you have to do more. You got to do more. They didn't really do enough, so it's still a concern. I do not think it's going to tank the season, because I feel very comfortable and confident with the weapons that they've added and how that is going to be able to mitigate some of the obvious flaws we know there to be on the interior of the offensive line.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen Justin Herbert win with bad offensive lines before, and I think that obviously gives you some kind of, reason for hope. I mean, especially I think when you go back to that 2022 season where Rashawn Slater tears his bicep in week 3. You did have Corey Linsley still at that time, right? And he still missed some time that season too. But you still ended up going 10-7 under a Brandon Staley-led team and ended up making the playoffs. And obviously you blew it in that game. But it's not like we haven't seen, this kind of almost exact scenario play out to a certain extent. And this line arguably could be better than that one. But I would say that you are hoping for a lot of best case scenarios. You are hoping that Zion Johnson, it finally clicks, that Mekhi Becton is the huge upgrade you're hoping he could be and he stays healthy. Plus Joe Alt takes a leap. Plus Pipkins can rediscover like his 2023 form, right? Because I think the thing is like the interior was such a plague last year and you only ended up upgrading one of those spots and that guy's already missed 3 weeks of training camp. Plus you don't have Rashawn Slater. It's hard to argue that this line is better than last year's line. Like obviously Joe Alt could be better, but like if you're making it a Rashawn Slater for Mekhi Becton trade off, right? Because you still have Pipkins in there, you still have Bozeman in there, you still have Zion Johnson in there. Yeah. That's hard to sell as a huge upgrade. Now, can they be better around him? Can they run the ball better and help out their offensive line more? Yes, all of those things are true, but it's still a huge worry for me going into the year and a frustration that more resources weren't put into that. Because I mean, now we're 2 drafts in with Joe Ortiz. The only interior offensive lineman that they picked was Branson Taylor in the 6th round, and he got cut and is on the practice squad. That is what it is, right? The numbers speak for themselves there. But the running game, that is the other big kind of looming question, I think, for this offense, which is just how much better will this running game be better, David? And that will have another kind of huge impact on whether or not this offense can make improvements to not have kind of the lulls or the inefficiencies that we saw from them last year.
Yeah, I mean, and I really enjoyed watching J.K. Dobbins for the Chargers last year. I feel like he had some explosive moments and some great runs and some runs where he was able to close out football games. Those were all great. But he also had way too many runs that got stopped with either 0 or very, very little yardage, that he was able to get off those plays. What I am very confident in is this year with Omarion, Hampton, and Najee Harris healthy running the football, these are guys that are going to fall forward, that are going to get that extra half a yard. That could be the difference between where they're at last year at 4.1 yards a carry, about 26th in the NFL, or tied with a bunch of teams for that, to getting into the top 10, which is where it was about 4.5 yards a carry. I feel like with the violence that they run with the consistency of Najee Harris and that home run threat with that physicality that Omarion Hampton brings to the table, I feel very good that if these guys are on the field, they're going to have a better rushing attack because the talent in the room is better than it was last year.
Yeah, because I think obviously the offensive line is a big part of why the running game struggled last year for sure, but it was a little bit disproportionate to kind of where their advanced metrics were to what they actually ended up finishing in the league, which was not one of the best. It was one of the worst rushing attacks in the NFL last year by efficiency. And this is a huge outlier in Greg Roman's career. We've talked about it before. If there was someone you would think could bounce back from a bad season, it would be Greg Roman, because he was a top 4 rushing attack in 9 of his 11 seasons, 4 separate league leading seasons as far as rushing yards in a year. And before last year, where they finished 17th or 18th, I believe, the worst finish they'd ever had was 8th. So like last year was the huge anomaly of that group, right? And I do think that having Omarion Hampton, having Najee Harris, who brings you, getting those tough yards to keep you ahead of the sticks, keep you kind of, in manageable situations, which is valuable.
In rhythm, on time.
Yep. But also had the 5th most 20-plus yard runs last season in the NFL, too, with 9. And then you look at, J.K. Dobbins last year, 23rd out of 46 running backs, so right in the middle as far as yards after contact per attempt. He was 30th out of 46 in elusiveness grade per PFF. Now you look at Gus Edwards, 40 out of 46 in yards after contact per attempt, 45 out of 46 in elusiveness. So I don't think that, Najee Harris is super elusive, right? I do think Omarion Hampton has some of that, but I do think that is going to lead to improvement for this group, especially because I think outside of Trey Pipkins, you can make a great argument that the rest of those guys are above average run blockers at least.
Yeah.
Joe Alt, a huge, X factor in that regard. Mekhi Becton, as far as getting some push on the line of scrimmage, could be huge for them in that regard. But it's going to have to be a much better rushing attack of the Chargers, do want to beat these good teams, do want to get to double-digit wins and make the playoffs. But we need to switch things over to the defensive side of things because we need to talk about this cornerback experiment that the Chargers have going on right now with a lack of kind of starters being announced and maybe just some big question marks in that room and some other big defensive side of things questions that we have and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner and you can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. And if you haven't joined a league yet, now is the time. It's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. This year I'm playing football on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran creating your millionth league. Yahoo Fantasy is loaded with fun ways to compete and brand new features to make the game even better. With season kickoff on September 4th, now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers so many fun ways to compete. It's starting tomorrow, guys. Now is the time. Want more ways to play? Try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated weekly until only one team is left standing. But for the classics, get your crew together and go ahead in a head-to-head private league. The NFL season kicks off September 4th, so don't wait. Start your league now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. The NFL season is here now. Tomorrow is the first game, and FanDuel is making sure you are ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer because right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app and to use across this NFL season. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. And the odds are already out for the Chargers' first game in Brazil. They will enter as 3-point underdogs against the Kansas City Chiefs on Friday night. And they're plus 132 to win the game straight up. But I like the specials that they have, including this one. Omarion Hampton to have at least 5 rushing yards in every quarter. You can get that at plus 260, right? It's 2.5 times your money. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. David, we still have some more lingering questions, especially on the defensive side of things. So I wanted to get to the cornerback room because it has probably the highest volatility rate as far as the position groups on defense. It could be really good, and it could be very lacking, depending on how some of these guys play and if these buy low candidates like Dante Jackson or Benjamin St-Juste can actually do that and bounce back. But thank you guys, especially on the eve of the NFL season, for coming here and making us your first listen. But if you guys need a second listen, make sure you guys are checking out the Locked On Division Preview. That's on right now on Locked On NFL. Be the most informed NFL fan in an 8-episode series, bringing you every division winner, breakout star, and Super Bowl contender. Find the link in the description to the Locked On NFL playlist on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. David, there are a lot of questions on this team, but I think we're feeling good about the depth overall. I think the starting talent is really where you would have your biggest question marks, right? This is a deep team, but there are some starters or potential starters that we still have some questions about, especially, I'd say, in the cornerback room, because I think we both love Tarheeb still. He is the one guy that I believe in, a guy that I think can be a really good player for you.
Yeah.
But after that, I think it would be really hard to have full confidence in, really any of the other guys for one reason or another in that room.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely good reason to have some question marks about several of these guys. I think for Cam Hart, the potential and the talent is definitely there. The guy, when he's on the field, he plays physical and he plays big. He feels like he's a guy that, there's not really anybody out there that you feel like he can't go out there and cover. I mean, he's shown to be able to play good quality football. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So for him, I think he has to challenge himself. Hey, can I stay on the field? Can I try to do what I need to do in between games to be able to make it through the rigors of a very physical football season? And for Dante Jackson, can those interceptions carry over to a new team in a new scheme, in a new system in 2025? Because if he brings 4 to 5 interceptions, then that's going to be tremendous value for somebody in a team that really didn't pick off the ball a lot last year. If they can get those interceptions, if he can provide that, that's going to really, really help. And I think for Benjamin St-Juste is, are they going to be able to put him in positions to utilize his length and his physicality and mitigate some of the things he doesn't do well? It's going to be Jesse Minter playing the matchups and cycling guys through like we know that he likes to do. So can he be able to find the right mix, and will anybody jump out and just claim the starting cornerback spots? That's something to watch in this 2025 season.
Well, I think the hard thing about the cornerback room is like, if you have a really good corner and somebody, kind of thrusts themselves into the atmosphere of some of the best in the league, you still have two other corners that are playing on the same field at the same time as you are, right? So it's not as much as just having kind of one guy, as much as you need a couple of these guys, if they're not great, to be at least good, to be at least, starting level. And you're putting a lot of faith in the coaching staff and Steve Clinkscales and Jesse Minter to be able to do that, because you haven't brought in any high price free agents through 2 years in this, in this era. You haven't spent premium draft resources on this position through 2 drafts. And they've only had 2 drafts. Some positions are going to get left out, but the way they've talked about the cornerback room, you'd be a little surprised if you had only listened to them to see that they've spent only 5th and 7th round picks on that position through 2 years, right? And one of those guys, like Branson Taylor, is already cut. So we talk about a lot them not spending the resources in the offensive line. Maybe not as much about them not really doing it in the cornerback room. And when you're bringing in guys like Christian Fulton and Dante Jackson and Benjamin St-Juste, guys coming off of down years, because even with the interceptions, the metrics really did not like Dante Jackson.
No.
Will it come back to bite them? Or can you continually keep getting guys to have much better years, career years, like Christian Fulton did, like Elijah Molden did, and keep being able to kind of spend minimally on that position? Because that is not a strategy you see work often. You have to really trust your coaching staff to get that done. But I think going into the season, the most underrated group is probably the interior of the defensive line. I definitely feel better about it going into this season, especially with Mike Elston, coach extraordinaire. But I feel good about pretty much every guy in this room right now, David. And even though there isn't a star player, it's an incredibly deep room, and a room that I think is going to be one of the strengths of the team.
Yeah, I feel like they have quality NFL defensive linemen that they're going to be able to go out there, and you're not going to see much of a drop off, whether it's Otito Ogbonnia or Deshaun Hand or Naquan Jones. I feel like you're going to get quality play out of those, and I feel like there's potential in the room that we haven't seen or had for a very long time with Jamaree Caldwell. I think we've seen some flashes of brilliance and potential there that you kind of want to see what that potential turns into, because he has the strength. He has kind of the pass rush ability, where I feel like this is a guy who could take that potential and turn himself into being one of the better defensive linemen that the Chargers have had in quite a while.
Right. I mean, obviously they had Poona Ford last year, and you don't want to kind of minimize
young options. Yeah, young developmental options.
Like the future at that position.
Yes.
For sure. But before Poona Ford was the best defensive tackle potentially they've had since Jamal Williams. So he raised that bar, and that's why it was so tough to see him stay in town, but basically walk across the street, or however you want to put it. But the one guy, I'm so excited about Jamaree Caldwell. I think he will be a starter at some point. I think the depth that you have in that room and the amount of guys you feel good about with Deshaun Hand and Naquan Jones, like you talked about. Justin Aboybe looks better. Tito Ogbonnia looks like he's taking a leap. And none of those guys were on the injury report this week. You should have a full, healthy room of those guys. You should be able to keep them fresh. You should be able to heavily rotate out there, right? And with corners, if you're rotating a bunch, it probably means you don't have those top guys, right? The interior defensive line, it's a little bit different, because there aren't guys that are playing 100% of snaps in any game, even the best of them. So I think the one guy I'm keeping my eye on is Tar. He's the guy that I think, especially with how little they played him in the preseason, he was kind of the one guy they really put in
protected
that pedestal
a little bit.
Of, he was the only guy that really only played very minimal snaps in one game out of the unit. And the only guys who didn't play were Derwin and Khalil Mack. So I think for him, it's easy to kind of forget, because of how few snaps that he played, that he ranked top 20 out of 220 defensive linemen last year, not only in pass rush grade, but also in run, really good. And run defense grade as well, too. It was just about, why didn't he play more, right? And it does feel like that is a An interesting question, and one that you think, even with the amount of guys they have, that he's kind of a big part of that and is playing a lion's share of the snaps because he was so efficient last year. But I think this will also be a good run defense group overall. I think it'll be an improvement of what they had last year, the size, the physicality. And I think there's a reason that no preseason team that went up against them, I know it's the preseason, but none of them averaged more than 3.8 yards per carry in any of the games, right? We've seen Chargers defenses get shredded. I think it speaks to the depth because a lot of the guys you see in those rotations were the guys that were playing in those preseason games and getting some of those snaps. So I think it's a fortified unit. I think it's a deep unit. Let's one last quick question before we get out of here, David. This is a group that we've talked about some, but without Tony Jefferson, do you still think the safety group is still the strongest position on the team?
I do. I really do feel like it's still the strongest position group on the team because the top end talent obviously is at the elite level with Derwin James, and Elijah Molden I feel like is a fantastic free safety out there. Really gives you some comfort on the back end. Alohi Gilman has his moments. He has very good timing. He knows where to be to make plays. And the new addition with RJ Mickens, I feel like this guy showed himself very, very well to be able to tackle in space. To be trusted as that last line of defense defender. He's probably going to have to work his way on the field by playing a ton of special teams. But even with Tony Jefferson, who I feel like is probably going to get elevated, a few times throughout the season, just the room as a whole feels like it's one of the top rooms in the league.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going 1 through 5, if you're including Tony Jefferson, right, like it'd be hard to beat that. And even Kendall Williamson, who is the guy actually on the roster right now, is safety 5. Had some good moments in the preseason and looked pretty good, right? That's why it was more about how well Tony played, less about how, bad Kendall Williamson played, because I didn't think that he did. And he's been with the team now a couple of years. He's made some huge strides and is a huge special teams contributor, so no shade to him. The one guy I really have the questions about is Alohi Gilman. Like, we've just seen him be up and down, and he is very instinctual. He has the knack for making big plays, but when you're not guessing, but when you're taking those chances, it can come back to bite you as well. So
No
physically,
doubt.
I hope he's all there, right? Because last year it did seem like he was starting to come on towards the end of the season. So if you have, those three guys, especially with Durham playing so much in the slot and having two guys you feel good about back there, and also knowing there shouldn't be a point in this season where you have guys like Eddie Jackson or Marcus May having to get signed off the streets to play in meaningful games for you, you're in a really good spot with this safety room right now, and we'll see it have to come to fruition on Friday night because they're going to need that to be one of the strengths of this team and the strength of this defense on the back end. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. The good news is tomorrow is the first crossover Thursday of the year, and it's going to be David holding it down against our bitter rivals with the Locked On Chiefs podcast, and then those guys tomorrow. Make sure you guys are back here for that by subscribing or following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. If you guys want to call in your bold predictions for Friday's show, the first bold predictions of the season, you can do that at 323-524-7924 on the Locked On Chargers voicemail line. But man, it's game week starting now. Crossover Thursday tomorrow, and a game day show coming out for you guys on Friday. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.